All right, welcome back. So next, we're continuing with forms. We're talking about checkboxes and radio buttons in a special class called Form Check. So if we go to the docs, you go to Forms, go to Checkboxes and Radios. Quickly, let's review the difference. With a checkbox, you can select as many as you want. With a radio button, you select one at a time. It toggles the others off, or the other one off, as you change your selection. Checkboxes, you can have, two or more selected. So the way that this works, there's a special class called Form-Check, and it works both for radio buttons and checkboxes. What we do, let's start with checkboxes, is for each checkbox, we wrap it in Form-Check. So all of this code right here is for one checkbox. It has an input where we have type equals checkbox, we have our label, and both the input and the label have a special class, Form-Check input, Form-Check label. So there's kind of a lot going on. Let's just review this now on our own. I lost it. There we go. I'm going to come over here. I have a new file called checks.html. And I'm going to start in my container. I'll just add an H1 that says form checks or something. And then I'll come down here. And we need to make a form-check div for a single checkbox. And then we're going to do an input. Type equals checkbox, and then we'll also have a label. So on its own, it's probably not very exciting. Let's say our label, let's do a checkbox where users can specify what pets they have. So let's say chickens. Okay, so we have our checkbox, but now to make it function better, or to look better, I should say, not function better, we give it a type or a class of form check input and save. And then we give the label a class of form check label. And this just makes the label, it changes the margin on the bottom. It's hard to see when there's not other checkboxes, but because when you have multiple checkboxes, you usually don't want a ton of spacing between them like you might with separate form inputs or separate labels. So there's a different class, form check label. So I should make this for work here. I'm going to say for chickens and give it an ID of chickens. Okay, so this is our single checkbox. Now we can duplicate this to make a second one, and this one will be, let's say, cats. And now we have two checkboxes. So if I didn't have this form check label, it's not the end of the world. It just adds some extra spacing there. So when you add it, it just makes things pack tighter together. So that's to make checkboxes. Let's just do one more. I'll fast forward. There we go. So now we have our checkboxes, and we can select as many as we want. As a side note, you can disable one by giving it the attribute over here of disabled. So if I don't want people to like chickens for some reason, I can just say chickens is disabled. And now you can't check it. Okay, I'll leave that there. Next up, we can do the exact same thing, but for radio buttons. So radio buttons, again, you can only select one at a time, but all we have to do, I can duplicate everything here if I wanted to. I'll make some space, and I'm going to add a divider here. So let's do like an H4 that says radio buttons, and up top, I'll do an H4 that says checkboxes. Okay, so for radio buttons, I'll get rid of the disabled. Actually, never mind, I will leave that there. What we need to do is change type to be radio. And that's it. You can see it's now a radio shape. We still can't click it because it's disabled. So once I change the other two to type equals radio, they look like radio buttons. However, I can still select two of them, and that's not how it's supposed to work. So I need to give them the same name, which is how these radio buttons work. So in this case, let's just give it a name of pets or pet, like that. And if I save, now I can only select one of them versus the checkbox. To be certain, I should give this a name too to group them together, but it's not functionally going to make a difference like it does here. But it is important to use that name if we're trying to get the data out of the form later on. The last thing is that we can do an inline one with both checkboxes or radio buttons. It doesn't matter. All we need to do is give a class of form check inline to the individual form checks. So like we've seen a lot in Bootstrap, you still need form check, but we add this in addition. So I'll just duplicate this whole thing, And this time I'll say this is inline form checks. So form check and then form dash check dash inline. And then we'll just give that to all of them and save. And there we go. It looks like this. Now, if we want it to be a little bit nicer, what we should do is wrap each of these in a form group. So I'll do that now. And there we go. It just adds a little bit of margin on the bottom, groups things together. And that's it. So we've made checkboxes using form check. We've done radio buttons with form check, except it's type equals checkbox or type equals radio. And then to make them inline, form check inline. And we get them in line. And the same would apply to checkboxes, but I won't do it. All right, moving on.